Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy Fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I am your host, Phil Bakke, and I am joined by the other hosts tonight. We've got a full house. I'm joined by Mika Burrell. Mika, what's up?
Hey. Nothing's up, man. 2025 is upon us. I know it's been a while, you guys, but with everything that went on last season, sometimes you just gotta hang it up, Pookie. Like, you just gotta take a little break, little mental health break from all of it. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad to be back, glad to be talking to y'all. Let's get into it.
Yeah, we've got a big one planned, and we had to have Christian Canales as well. Christian, welcome.
Hello. I'm back again. This is season 6 now, right?
No, 7.
7.
Wait.
Oh my god.
6? 7?
I don't know.
How many years have we been doing this shit?
I mean, since the beginning.
2019, right?
19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Oh yeah, season 7.
Season 7.
So we were founded in 2018. I think our first game was in 2019.
2019, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
7. What? That's crazy. Entering our seventh season. Yeah, we are back, and lots to talk about. Obviously, with the off season now about a month away from being over, a little less. We're 20 something days, whatever it was, away from opening day, March 8th against Colorado Springs, the reigning USL championship winners. And I was hoping to have more off-season news to cover by the time we recorded this episode. There is stuff to talk about for sure. But recently, I know I put out the article on Seriously Loco and then on my blog as well about sort of my concern about the state of the club and kind of where it's been at and the activity around it. So if you haven't checked that out and you listen to us, go check that out. Let me know what you think. But I would say our episode is going to be in a similar vein in terms of, rather than focusing strictly on what happened this offseason, we're trying to kind of zoom out a little bit and use like some stuff that we know about the club and just try to piece together for folks, like, I guess partially why we've been feeling the way that we've been feeling and why we've been kind of so down versus like just having one crap season. And the worst in club history, and kind of zoom out a little bit and put it all into context. So it'll be a little bit of a, I was going to say state of the club, but it's really the fucking state of this club. The fucking state of it. So anyways, that's probably where we'll get into it. But first, to start to get us into it, as we typically do, Christian, do you have a question for us today?
I do. I feel like one of the themes of this episode is going to be regret. So, I do have a question for you guys. Just thinking back to, I don't want to go too far back, but thinking back to college, what is one decision you wish you would have made differently?
Whoa, going deep.
That's big.
Phil, you want to start?
I
would say you had a way unique college experience compared to the average person.
Yeah. There are only so many forks in the road, but I would say, and
it doesn't have to be a life-changing decision. It's like, I wish I would have gone to this football game and I didn't,
The one thing that I really wish I would have done and committed to would have been a semester abroad. I think like that's the one thing that I would have, if I had a chance to do it again. Like, we had semester abroad programs in like Jordan and Egypt and Morocco for like Arabic language students. So like I would have really tried to get to Morocco. That would have been, I'd have loved a semester abroad in Morocco. That would have been probably my one, I would say.
That's a good one. Dang. Yeah, because I only was able to do a mini mester in France. I didn't even get to do a whole semester. But um, I, I mean, I think the whole notion of like college and like you're 18 years old, please decide a life path is insane.
Yeah.
So I probably would not have chosen to major in nursing. Like that was just a year and a half of misery. I was
Well, I was going to
clearly
say, and famously, you are just a practicing nurse right now.
exactly right. Yeah, that was just never that was never in the cards, and it was like just not my thing. I did it because my mom's a nurse, and she was like, it's practical. Like you don't have to like do so many years of school to have a really decent career, which is true. Like nursing's a great path and a great profession,
sure.
but like just not for me at all. So that was just a lot of unnecessary suffering, I think.
Yeah.
But I tried it, wasn't for me, and I ended up on a better path. But it just, when I think back on it, I'm like, I just cringe because it's like, this is the first time in my life I ever got a D, like, because it was just not my thing, like I wasn't, yeah.
It's like, and you paid cash for that.
Yeah, so it just, I would not have chosen that. But yeah, eventually was able to change my major, transfer, whatever. And I'm doing something that suits me a lot more now. So, but yeah, just unnecessary suffering for sure.
Very nice.
What about you, Christian?
I would have been more actively like looking for opportunities in athletics. I see a lot of stuff now, like on Twitter and stuff, where like my alma mater's like athletics department is like, oh, like apply to be like a team manager, and it's like, I don't know if that stuff wasn't around or if I just wasn't looking hard enough. Because like obviously social media was around. This is, shoot, what year are we in? This is going to be like 10 years ago, like over 10 years ago now. But I think that maybe my excuse for myself is that maybe it wasn't as prevalent, so those opportunities were a little bit harder to find. But now I just see them, and it's like, man, like I could just go back and tell 19-year-old Christian to, go talk to someone. Because, as you are aware, Mika, I'm sure, is athletic is one of those things where you just have to get in earlier, else it's really hard to get in at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What? Otherwise, you can't afford to be working for free once you're in your late 20s, early 30s. So,
yeah, exactly.
College is the time to do it. But that's my big regret.
No, that's fair, and it's that's the type of stuff that is like along Mika's lines, where it's like decide, right? Where it's like,
it's just absolutely mental, like,
and especially with stuff like sports or whatever, like the pressure of being an 18-year-old too and picking a major is you have to tell your parents like what you're picking, right? Like it's like, yeah, you're away at school, and I still had to call them and be like, yeah, so I'm thinking about like whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, what, and you're like, oh, sure. I mean, unless that is stupid, right? Like unless that's dumb, and if not that's stupid, then maybe I don't do that. Like
100%. Yeah.
So
goodness.
Stability, #stability. So no, hey, good question. We're starting off deep, and there are many things to regret about being involved with Locomotive. No, I guess in terms of actually like kicking this off, I figured the real place to start is obviously the 2025 season is about to start, and our team looks wildly different than it did at the start of 2024, probably about as different as it possibly could. So I thought it was probably worth talking about our new acquisitions and sort of like the makeup of the team as it is now. I think there's really only one place to start the conversation about the team in broad terms before we get into the actual like individuals that we've added, and that is, it is small. There are 23 rostered players as of right now, 22 rostered players. Apologies, 22 rostered players with the departure of Bolu Akinyode and the addition of Frank Lopez. And 2 of those players are promoted academy players in terms of Kenneth Hoban and Omar Mora, who joined the squad. So we've been in this sort of situation before. Mark Lowry famously carried quite small squads into the season. But it always felt like there was an element of maybe editing that was going to go on mid-season. The last couple of years, we've carried larger squads than that typically. And I don't know, I feel a little uneasy going into the year with such a lean squad.
Yeah, I think it's a big concern. I mean, you said 22 players. I mean, that's not even enough for a national team going to a tournament, right?
We literally have enough to play 11v11 in training, right?
That's it.
We literally have just enough.
Right. I mean, 2 of those are goalkeepers and 2 are academy promotions who have never played at the top level, at the top level men's game. Midfield is very thin. I mean, when Eric Calvillo is by far the minutes leader in that midfield core, I don't know. It's thin. It's thin, and on top of that, it's also there's just no real continuity. I mean, it's Eric and a bunch of new dudes. I mean, Coronado, yes, he's kind of returning, and I think he did try to make an impact after he was brought in from Fuego.
Yeah.
But they're just gonna have to gel really, really quickly. And then of course Daroma and Emiliano Rodriguez, who Emiliano Rodriguez is quite young, if I'm not mistaken, right? Isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, you could almost call Rodriguez an academy promotion too, because he played 150 minutes last season, right?
Yeah. So half the squad is defenders. Not enough midfielders. Up top looks really lean too. I mean, I guess the only player that is quote unquote marquee signing is Frank Lopez, coming over from Miami, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And
the best goal scorer on the worst team, one of the worst teams statistically, ever in USL Championship.
Right. And Wilmer Disciple, right? I mean, he played
RGV,
under Wilmer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the squad building has left a lot to be desired, and with less than a month to go until we host. Do we host the champions or we go to the champions?
We host. Yeah.
We host the champions.
Yikes!
Big yikes. So yeah, it's concerning. Definitely concerning.
Christian, I mean, the squad building question particularly is probably worth examining a little bit. And I know we'll talk probably a little bit about club structure and stuff as we go forward. But the one thing that was really unique about this offseason is that the club promoted Ray Sari into the technical director position, separating out the manager. First team manager and technical director are now 2 different positions, which we felt would be a step in the right direction, would lead to some more cohesive squad building. And ultimately the results this offseason have felt sort of, I don't know, this probably would have happened anyways.
Yeah. Nothing about this feels like different. This is exactly what we would have expected anyways, like you said. So that whole decision, I guess, feels like a excellent idea, poor execution.
Yeah.
It's the right the right structure, but seems like if not the wrong move, then a very lateral move.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just seems like if you have to fill in whatever role Ray was filling before, now that's just another person you have to pay, which just takes more resources away from everything else that the club should be doing. So I don't know. It just seems redundant, unnecessary.
In terms of the actual additions, just to go through the list, we had our now who we assume will be the number 2 between Jamali Waite and Sebastian Moramora, the goalkeeper from Celaya, and then Memo Diaz returning to the squad from Oakland, and having had like a very solid year in Oakland last year. So we'll say that is, a player who is probably probably warranted bringing in, and obviously nice to have the local boy back. But then Alvaro Quezada from Memphis, we latched on to. We mentioned the Kenneth Hoban promotion from the academy. Gabby Torres from Phoenix, who he played like sort of a rotational role last year in a Phoenix team that couldn't really figure out like what it was. Frank DeRoma comes from Tacoma Defiance in MLS Next Pro, and playing around 1,000 minutes for them, so not necessarily locking down like consistent first team minutes. And then we had Omar Mora, the academy promotion. We have Daniel Carter, who was the loanee from Real España in Honduras.
Correct.
Yeah, Honduras. And then who was, again, like a very sort of marginal player like in that squad. And then Frank Lopez, who, as we said, like he was the go-to guy on the worst team in the league last year. So I think like when you take the business sort of like each piece, you're kind of like, okay, like Memo Diaz at fullback, that's a fine signing. I thought Quezada being announced like right after Memo Diaz was a little bit strange, because you're like 2 right backs in a row. I'm not really like feeling, but we needed right backs. Like we didn't really have any. We have all center backs. So so there's that. And then a left back in Gabby Torres, and you're kind of thinking like, okay, well, what's the direction here? We signed DeRoma, which it's like we had to, because we literally have 3 midfielders. So you had to do that. And actually we signed DeRoma when Bolu Akinyote was still technically on the squad. So we were, thinking that probably Bolu was going to stick around. Obviously he's out. And then in terms of signings, like in the offseason, the only other announcement was that Andy Cabrera is staying, like, or had signed an extension. But Omar Mora, academy promotion, Daniel Carter, 3 goals for Real España last season. Frank Lopez, 7 goals for Miami. I mean, the reality is, in a team that scored the least goals in the West, and the only team that scored less goals than them was Miami. El Paso did not sign a single player that had double-digit goals in whatever competition, like in any competition last year. And in fact, the player that they signed who had the most goal contributions last year was Memo, with 8, like a goal and 7 assists, which is impressive from fullback. And like Oakland had people who scored goals like for him to assist, right? So that's like the really troubling thing for me about this squad, is that like, yes, they were better defensively down the stretch. They were still very, very poor in front of goal all the way to the very end. Like after Wilmer, before Wilmer, after Wilmer, this team did not score goals. And we now have not a single player on the squad had double-digit goals last season, and a couple of our players have had double-digit goals before, but most of them are far removed from those seasons. I mean, Amano Moreno obviously had a great year the year before he joined us for New Mexico, and Tumi Moshibane, same deal, really, really good goal-scoring return in San Diego. It doesn't fill me with a ton of confidence that, like, if we turned those guys from, we turned Amano Moreno from a 15-goal season into a 6-goal season. We turned Tumi Moshibane from a 11-goal season into a 1-goal season. Signing Frank Lopez with 7 goals, or like his balance is going to be negative next year. Like he's going to score like 3 own goals.
Oh my God! Please don't manifest that. I mean, in defense of Armando and Toomey, I think we harped about this a lot last season. Is that they were both, in our opinion, being misused.
Sure.
With Armando playing in like a 2, and Toomey, Brian Clarehout trying to gaslight everyone into thinking that he's an 8. So,
A false
I
10.
mean, or a false set, right? Yeah. So,
Check Y Scout, Mika.
yeah, it's.
He can play there.
Oh my goodness.
Unhinged interactions.
Truly. So yeah, I think for the two of them, I mean, like we just did not put them in the best position to perform in a dysfunctional team. Let's face it. But yeah, with Frank Lopez, you're gonna have to hope, and he really has to hit the ground running. And if he doesn't, I think we're gonna be in big trouble early on. But yeah, it's just. And then Andy Cabrera, I think he showed sparks of a player that could be impactful, but never really turned that into anything tangible in terms of goals and assists. Pour one out for Malik McLemore. We thought he was going to change our lives, and he played 4 games, had an assist, and promptly went back to Germany. So that was our last bit of optimism at the end of last season, and that's gone because he looked really, really exciting. And yeah, that's no longer going to be a thing. And I think it's interesting too that you mentioned Bolu, because I think originally, am I mistaken that he was originally slated to return, and then all of a sudden, they agreed to part ways. And then not only that, he went back to Miami, the only team worse than us.
Yeah.
So, what does that say? I don't know. Maybe it just means he was in Miami for a handful of seasons. Maybe he feels more at home there, and it's a homecoming for him. But still, the fact that Miami has pull for a player like that, and we couldn't keep him. Yet another player that I think we misused, is a shame. So yeah, it's just hard. It's just hard not to be worried about the state of this squad. And again, there's still time. There's still time to make additions, and I don't know. It's thin. It's really thin. It's low on quality. And we've lost a lot of productivity and also personality. I mean, I think we can't also glaze over the fact that, for what it's worth, Yuma and Edo Borelli have officially retired now, so that's just even more experience, all those years, going out the door. And they were kind of on the way out given the injury histories and everything like that. So it's just really new in terms of the actual personalities now that are going to be in the dressing room. But the one thing that I don't think we should glaze over, if we're going to be super down on the team, maybe our best signing is keeping Jamali Waite. I mean, I don't think any of us thought or felt entitled to his services for the 2025 season, given how under fire he was in 2024 and how he was far and away our best player, I think, and our most consistent performer. So for him to be coming back while still, trying to make a name for himself with the Jamaica squad and all of that is crazy. So I think that is the one bright spot, I suppose.
The Waite re-signing, I definitely did not see Jamali coming back to us after he performed in the was that the Gold Cup?
Right, when he had that absolute standout against Mexico. Was that Mexico?
Where he held out for he made some kind of crazy amount of saves and
and the only goals he conceded were unsavable screamers,
just bangers.
Yeah.
Unbelievable tournament. Yeah, I was not expecting his return. I will say the other thing that stood out to me, and this is where I think and we can get into sort of the state of the club, but I think when you have the likes of, Ronaldo Damas going to Legion, Danny Trejo coming back to the league and going to Birmingham Legion, even guys fan favorite Douglas Martinez is now in Charleston, as is Cal Jennings. Even guys like Khalil Ahmedkar is in Tulsa. And then Edward Kizza, Elvis Amo, like are in Indy. Just like number 9s were available this offseason, like with league experience. And I think between like the obviously like very poor season that they had, I feel like we didn't exactly like, we weren't a destination. Like even if we were in for some of these players, like what is the sales pitch to some of these guys versus what like some of these other clubs can bring? And I would argue that like at the beginning of last season, there would have been nothing stopping us from having a much better sales pitch than a Birmingham, right? Like, and that's not disrespect to Legion specifically. It's just saying like our profile was pretty good in terms of like recruiting, and
we signed a former Premier League and La Liga starter in Mark Navarro. So yeah, absolutely. I don't want to hear anyone say we've never had pool.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, money talks, right? I mean, players have come here and been very handsomely remunerated, and maybe we'll get into that later. But
sure,
yeah, they still had to be sold on the project, and I think you're absolutely right. That has not been borne out in some of the recruitment that we've done thus far for this 2025 season.
And I think to the Amando Moreno point, like enable and Tumi Moshibane, like in order to be able to use them in the spot that they will thrive the most, like you need somebody who's occupying that number 9 space to allow them to like operate in wide areas and play off of them and all that sort of stuff. And like maybe it is like maybe Lopez and Carter, like they are going to be like those players that bring them in. It just doesn't necessarily feel like we have a true like game changer up front that is gonna like unlock these other guys. But I would share the concern that central midfield is actually like, despite me memeing about like the goal scoring and all that sort of stuff, like I think central midfield is actually like the largest concern, just with, I mean, four senior central midfielders is like insane. That's just like not sustainable unless the plan is to use like, and that's where we get back into the misusing, where it's like, who are we planning to use in there that's never played in there? And that's where the concern comes in.
Yep.
Well, so I think as we talk about concern, it's probably worth just shifting gears to sort of like the state of this club, and talking about just some of the things that we know to be true, like about the club, and obviously like the connection with the fans and all of that. And I think by way of starting, we asked for some voice memos from folks, and we did get a handful. So I'll try to weave them in as sort of gracefully as I can. But I wanted to start with a voice memo that we got from Nick Govea, who's been a longtime listener to the show, and I think quite concisely captured probably the feelings of a lot of folks at this particular moment.
This is Nick Govea, and look, I love the team. I love the fact that there's professional soccer in El Paso. I will always be forever loco. But I think you look at the whole picture, the small team size, the lack of investment in a women's team, the lack of investment in the stadium. The team is simply another asset, and I would argue a depreciating asset at that, in the owner's portfolio. And so it's really tough pill to swallow, because I think we, as El Paso fans, demand more. We had more, right, for several years, and now we're just kind of stuck in neutral. And really, there's nothing to be excited about besides a new season, but not anything actually coming from the club. They're not generating any excitement, and I think they're probably okay with that. That, to me, is sad.
Nailed it.
Yeah, what did you guys think of Nick's, just by way of starting sort of where we're at with this club?
Yeah, is that man in our group chat or what? Because honestly, like that is like bar for bar every concern that we've shared with each other personally for the last like 6 months. And I mean, on that note, I mean, all I can say is he's absolutely right. You know, it just, this club has just, it's lost any like semblance of soul, I think. And maybe like we're the fools, like maybe it was never really there and we were just all really excited for a few seasons about like the shiny new toy. But like you said, there's nothing to be excited about at this point. Like I don't care that this team is playing soccer again in March. Like it's I don't know. It's lost all its appeal, and you know, I do it, and I think we all share, you know, the same reason, in that like, one, we've invested so much time into this that it's hard to say, like, it's hard to just quit cold turkey. And also, like, we just want so badly for this to be a thing, you know, for this to be something that works out. And we can only like fool ourselves for so much longer.
Yeah, it's super bleak, and I think, I mean, I agree. I think Nick completely hit the nail on the head there. That it's just like, I think it's normal for the novelty to to go away after a while. Just because, you know, with the passing of time, obviously, like, things are not as exciting, and you know, it's not new. But I think that they could have, I think the club and Mountain Star Sports Group could have fostered more interest in the team, or, you know, or like continued in that excitement by, I don't know, if not, I mean, the mistakes are made, so we kind of can't say, like, if they had just not like hired whatever John Hutchinson, Brian Clarehouse. I mean, I understand why those decisions were taken at that time, but I think what your piece on Patreon kind of hit on, Phil, is maybe just like acknowledging that didn't work, and I think people would appreciate that and say, okay, like, we're willing to give this team and this club another chance. But when you just bury your heads in the sand and don't address these issues and say, you know, this season wasn't good enough, and the season before it wasn't good enough, and the season before that wasn't good enough, and here's what we're going to do about it, and we're going to show you, we're not just going to talk. You know, when you don't do that, you really lose people. And when I say people, I mean like the diehards, right? Because they're the ones that they want to hear from you. Whereas the casuals, like, they'll come when they can, but if there's something else going on in town, like, oh, I don't know, UTEP games that are going to, quite a few are going to be going on during El Paso Locomotive home games this season, at least to start the season, they're going to go to that.
3 at the end of in September when football season starts. They're the first 3 UTEP home games all overlap with Locomotive home games. So as a heads up to the club, find a stand-in for Duke now. Like, try to get somebody scheduled for those shifts.
Like ASAP. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, when you don't take accountability, you lose people. And I don't know how they gained that back other than like putting out a good quote unquote product on the field. And it just doesn't look like it's going to be a good one. Could be. Then again, we've seen this club sign big names and it not amount to a championship or even a playoff season. So is signing under the radar signings and not signing those big names somehow going to lead to a bunch of success? I don't necessarily think so, but you know,
we'll just do the inverse and it'll work perfectly.
Yeah, so I mean, all of that, I'm kind of being a little unwieldy here with my commentary and my response to Nick's voice memo, but all of that to say, just yeah, it's the enthusiasm is at a low ebb, and I just don't know how you get that back, short of a miracle.
Well, while we're in this space, it actually, your comments, Mika, weave nicely into the next the next voice memo we got, which is Mark Ponce. And so I wanted to, this one is a little bit longer than Nick's, but equally, I think, poignant in this way, and it just feels fitting to plug it in here. So this one is from Mark.
I was a season ticket member from years 2 through 5, and I absolutely loved it, especially in years 2 and 3. In years 4 and 5, it's easy to look at those years and just see how poorly the club performed and say, well, that's why I didn't renew, but that's really not the case. The reason I didn't renew my season tickets was you could feel just the separation from club and supporters. I never really felt like the club and the eighth notch were aligned. And that's something that's palpable when you're inside that stadium and you're watching a game. The eighth notch is the heart and soul of the fans. And it almost made me feel like the eighth notch was looked at almost as a competitor to the club. And that's really the genesis of where I started to kind of lose my faith in the club a little bit. Yes, the play was poor. Coaching challenges, post Mark leaving, things along those lines. I get that. At the end of the day, even in the poorest of circumstances, a club can still keep things pretty united. During that poor play and another separation was the lack of press coverage or the lack of just accountability. When the team was winning, there's a lot of press, there's a lot of interviews, there's a lot of. But when they were losing, it's like they close the doors and they keep everything on the outside. And as fans, you can feel that. When you're just not in the loop anymore. Not hearing about the injuries or injury statuses, things along those lines. The false representations of hype and excitement on the social media posts. You suck. Just come out and say, hey, not our year, but we're working on things next year. I mean, any accountable do that. But no, this club just said, hey, we're going to close the doors. We're going to keep everything quiet. We're just going to hope that it silently improves. All the while, that just pushes us, the fan, away. And your prices at the swap are pretty high. It's pretty expensive to go. It's a choice. And I want to go have a great time. I still watch every single game on ESPN Plus or Hulu. I don't miss a match. When family gathers on Saturday evenings, we watch the games. We absolutely love the badge. We love what this club can be. We love to see the players perform well, advance. Hopefully, it's a joy to watch Dave at and knowing where he got started with the club. But at the end of the day, I just want to feel connected again, and hopefully something can change. Another area of separation, so to say, is the club doing their podcast when they've got the best podcast possible for the fans already in hand, and what seems like should be an easy partnership. Again, the club has made it out to be like you guys are villains in some sense, and that really just drives me up the wall. So, hopefully some things change. But the reality is they probably won't until the top line changes. Anyhow, thanks for everything you guys do. Love the show. I still love the club, still love the badge. It's about the players on the field. That's what we care about. The product will come and go. There will be good years, there will be bad years. At the end of the day, it's a great thing for the community. It's a great thing to have something to be proud of. Hopefully, I can continue to be proud of this club, but definitely easy to say that the existing fans and the eighth notch are why it continues to grow.
A little bit to chew on there, but I think it weaves in nicely, and I don't think it's any surprise that there's two completely different people with like very similar sentiments, essentially, that like what they want for the club and where the club is in terms of its connection to the people that have a desire to be connected to the club is like there is a literal disconnect right now.
Yeah, man, this is such a bummer. No, I mean, thank you so much for sending the voice memo. Obviously, we love to hear from all you guys. And first of all, I just want to say the comments about us, the podcasts those really touch us because as we have said for years, like we do this out of our passion for the club and just, creating this community with you guys. So thank you so much for the kind words. There's things that have gone on behind the scenes between Seriously Loco and the club, as well as, in front of you all. I mean, think of Richie Gate, but then there's also had to be times where, and I'm just being completely transparent now, where we've had to really advocate for ourselves to keep our access because we want to bring this content to you guys. So the reason I say that is because we too, as fans, but also as content creators, yearn for that connection as well. And it feels sometimes like we've had to really fight for it. And it shouldn't be that way. I don't think. This is our hometown club. This club, yes, it's really technically legally owned by Mountain Star Sports Group, but I think of owners of a football club as stewards, as custodians. The club really is for us, the fans, and us, the community. And so I hear you on that about, yearning for that connection again. And you bring up Eighth Notch. Eighth Notch, I mean, they were just so unwavering in their support for so many years. And it's sad. And I'm not, by no means am I trying to like shade anyone or anything, but it is sad to see Section 105 waning in numbers. And, not as much choreo and tifos and all these things that take a whole bunch of time of those guys and gals and money out of their own pocket to make those kind of things and do those special things for the club that the club then freely uses for advertising and marketing. So it's just really sad. What else? The coaches shows, those just like stopped after a while, right? Because, first of all, we knew that was never John Hutchinson's cup of tea, and he made that very clear. I think Brian tried. I think Brian really did try, but it was just so tough when the results were just constantly going against you to just get up there at the district and face that, right? And then with Wilmer, I don't even know. Like, I think it just stopped.
Yeah, I think he did one event. Like when it was like a meet Wilmer sort of thing when they first hired him. But I don't know that he actually did appearances like after that, like publicly or like supporter facing, outside of, just typical like press obligations.
Yeah. So it's just, just lends more support to Mark's comments that there's just a lack of connection there. And I don't know. I don't know how we get the club and get the people who make decisions to care more about the fans. So it's just tough.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me is that it'd be easy if I could look everywhere else in the league and say, well, this is just like the state of professional sports in America, because for a lot of other sports it's just like business, it's like Nick said, it's an asset in the portfolio. But it's especially hard for us specifically because like you look just up the road north and you see a club who is fantastic in New Mexico at being part of the community, at wanting to keep that involvement, no matter how terrible things are going. You have an owner who like has probably been to more soccer games, like more New Mexico United games in the last month that they were playing than the Locomotive owners have been to in our 6 seasons of existence so far. And certainly more involved with the fans. I don't think 9 out of 10 people, we could do like a man on the street segment and show pictures of Alan Ledford and company to people on the concourse, and 9 out of 10 would not know who those men are. And that's sad. It's very, very sad.
I'm sorry to this man's.
Because that's the way that these things should be done. Because the fact is, like, yes, this is a professional sports team, but they are not like there are reasons that I'm going to draw a football reference that Jerry Jones doesn't walk in the concourse at AT&T Stadium. That's a whole other level, and I just feel like that's what these guys, that's the space that they exist in, or that they think they exist in. And so they don't feel like it's necessary. But when you are at the scale that this team is, which is a community soccer team, that's what you need to do. Because outside of El Paso and wherever there might be a USL team-based city, no one knows who we are, and that's okay. But you have to then realize that those are the people that you have to interact with, the people that you have to sell to. I don't know.
Let me ask you this, Christian. Does Jerry Jones live in Dallas? Does he live in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex at least?
I would I at least during the football season I would imagine so. Because he's at they show him every game.
Right. Because Alan Ledford certainly does not live in El Paso.
Yeah, I guess that's true too.
As far as I know, he lives in California. So I mean, and I'm not saying like you have to move to El Paso to show you care, but it's just like you're just by default, like there's no way you have the same level of community investment as if you lived here.
Yeah. Maybe that's 100%. The other difference too, is to your point, Peter Trevisani almost certainly lives in
Albuquerque through and through. Like he is New Mexico through and through. I mean, I think he's from Boston originally, but he's very much ingrained himself into that community. So it's just levels.
And it comes through in stuff like stadium, like pushing for a stadium, all that sort of stuff, because like he gives a shit like whether Albuquerque has a soccer stadium, right? Like personally, like he cares. In addition to obviously having business interests, I'm not saying he's like benevolent completely and all of that stuff, like, but like he does ultimately have stakes, I guess, like where it just often feels like our ownership, like, and maybe even the front office, like it just doesn't feel like they actually care, like one way or another.
I mean, New Mexico have the Somos Unidos Foundation, which like is just the club's charitable arm, like bringing like supplies to like Navajo Nation students and working with the community. Like, just do we do stuff like that? I think we do like community things, but like we have not like literally started a nonprofit that is an arm of the club. Like, and I'm not saying we have to do that. I'm just saying
these are just things.
Levels.
Like
they're just levels.
Well, and
New
it's
Mexico United feels like a real club, like a real football club.
Which, like, I'm gonna be honest,
and we are the farthest from the marquee in the Mountain Star portfolio. Like the marquee team is FC Juarez, right? And then Chihuahuas, maybe, I guess, and then all the way down at the bottom is us.
A distant third. I think the thing that is tough too is like there are so many good examples, right? Like New Mexico hurts particularly because it is right up the road. But it's like, even if El Paso just copied half of the shit they do, like we'd probably be in a lot better shape, or at least feel better, right? Like even simple stuff like, I mean, having once purchased tickets to a New Mexico United game back in the day, like I am on a mailing list, which I do, like, for comparison's sake, I do look at the marketing emails I get from New Mexico United versus Locomotive. Like,
Yeah, when I had to buy tickets for the Derby, they like sent me a sticker and I was like annoyed. Like, because that's cool, but not from you.
Also, this is yeah, this is harassment.
Right.
So, but I like, so this season, like preseason, easy thing. They are having like what they call their black and yellow bash of like a preseason, like a start of the season party for people to go to, and like they sell tickets to it. It's not like completely, it's not like, oh, everybody comes free and like drinks free and all that sort of stuff. It's like they sell tickets and they sell drinks, but there is free food and they do their kit drop and all this stuff. And it is like a community event, like for the diehards to like meet new players, all this sort of stuff. And it's just like very public facing, where it's like this preseason, the opportunities that Locomotive fans have had to interact with this team are the preseason friendly against Barca Residency Academy. And then they were meant to have access to this friendly against UDA, which was then closed to the public. And in the post-training interview with Wilmer, they said, we won't be addressing the result of that game. So like nobody got to see anything that's going on, right? Meanwhile, like clubs around the league, you have playing like friendlies against MLS teams. Like Rhode Island curb stomped Orlando City the other day, like in a preseason friendly. And like, will that have any bearing on their season? Probably not. But like, what a cool like
it
thing
just
for their
creates
fans.
Buzz.
Exactly. And like, so it really pains me, because I think like there was a time, if you guys cast your minds back to the preseason of 2020, right before shit went completely sideways and our world was, went in the toilet. That preseason kit launch for season 2 was at GECU, and it was like a big party, and it was like this.
It was like a fashion show.
Yeah, they did like a fashion show with the players,
fun as hell.
And it was fun. And like Mark was there, and Mark was just like shooting the shit with people or whatever. And that was like the expectation, is that like, hey, that sort of stuff's going to continue. COVID happens, and it's almost like the club just completely has amnesia of like any of that sort of community connection stuff that you can do to build interest and build connection and build like any sort of just like secondary, alternative venue for people to like have any connection just beyond I attend the games sometimes. And yeah, it's just like, it's brutal to think back to like, and to see so many clubs like do it right, or attempt to get it right. I'm not saying every club is perfect. Like there are plenty of clubs in USL that struggle in these same ways or have poor operations or whatever. But the problem is that Locomotive at one point did get it and don't seemingly anymore, or don't care to anyways.
Right.
So I think like in terms of talking through sort of the big picture, I know we got like a little bit meta, or like maybe even further zoomed out than what we wanted, but like, or than what we originally planned. But in terms of this front office disconnect that people talk about, I think like it's interesting because of like what we've heard from around the club, that, post Mark Lowry, like I think there's a basically an understanding among fans. And I think this is now like how it's felt in like the broader USL community too, just based off of conversations I have, is that like Locomotive essentially like caught lightning in a bottle with Mark. He succeeded in like very specific ways, but it was like a personality based leadership, in that like Mark's specific personality and connections and like contacts in the game and all that stuff like enabled Locomotive to be successful. But the second that personality and that and those contacts and all of those things like left, the club didn't actually know like how to replace him, because they were completely reliant on him for like the connection with the fans. Like he was very like public facing. He wanted to be on the radio. He wanted to be on our show. He wanted to I've said this before on the podcast. I'm rehashing old ground, I'm sure, but he would reach out when shit got bad and be like, I think I need to come on the show and like talk about this, like to get out ahead of it or whatever. Like he wanted,
like, even if it was self-serving, it's still good.
More than what
it was still a net positive. Yeah, absolutely.
Recognizing that there is an outside of
like, please
of
do
use
slump. Our platform, right? However, whatever small it is. I'm not trying to big us up too much, but yeah, absolutely.
The connection. And so they didn't really know how to replace that personality or those contacts or anything. And so when they hired John Hutchinson, who like clearly is, he's well respected among like many coaching circles. He worked for Ange Postecoglou. He got a very, very prominent job like as an assistant back in Japan. Like he's been at very high levels of football. But he clearly was not interested in doing a lot of the other stuff that comes with being a head coach, right? Like being the manager and not an assistant. Like he hated recruitment. He hated having to do recruitment. He hated that, like the technical director side of things. He said that on multiple occasions, like the whole roster building thing. Like he much rather would have worked, I think, with a technical director or director of football, however you want to like say that. And like interviews and fan stuff or whatever, like he just didn't have that much time for it. Like he didn't really have the temperament for it. He got, I would say, easily annoyed by questions, which is maybe just a Postecoglou thing that we're like finding out now. Like he's kind of spiky, like with the media. He would kind of like
just the way he is, mate.
Right, exactly. And so, but he was a manager who had a pretty poor season. Like his one season here was like, we missed the playoffs we missed the playoffs, but the club wanted him back and he left, right? Like, even though many people, I think ourselves included, we were not like thrilled about the idea of him returning, and the club was the one who got told no, like rather than the other way around.
It's like, we didn't want you back. Wait, hold on. Not like that, though. Like, we wanted to tell you we didn't want you back.
You're breaking up with me?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah.
And then in the aftermath of that, hired Brian Clairhout, which is fine. A very mixed first season, literally Jekyll and Hyde of like, it was amazing. I thought we were the best team in USL for like 14 games. And then we were one of the worst teams in the league for the back half of the season. And so it's like, okay, which of these is, Brian Clairhout? Obviously the club believed in that first half of the season and gave him the keys, like completely to, hey, go rebuild the squad and go like have a full off season, all that sort of stuff. Let him completely rebuild and then abandon that project. No joke. I mean, it obviously was going horribly. Like there's no two ways about the results were like unspeakably bad right at the beginning of last season. That being said, like you pour all of this, like all of these resources and everything into like a full on rebuild under this new coach, or under this coach that you've now, has had one full season of data, and it implodes like completely in 3 months. So again, like front office having to then go back to the drawing board and hiring Wilmer Cabrera, which like, again, is just a very like, I would say the club often said that there was like through lines in these hires of like, Mark had like a very specific like sort of possession style, and he wanted to like play football like people didn't play in the lower leagues, all that sort of stuff. And so they were like, Hutchinson, similarly, like he's got this very distinct style, attacking, like exciting, all this sort of stuff. Clairhout, attacking, exciting, like it's gonna, pressing, like, and they kind of threw out all of these football buzzwords. And then in the aftermath of the Clairhout thing, it's like, we're going to hire Wilmer Cabrera, who is like the opposite, like in terms of style, is just like completely a departure stylistically or like philosophically from the first three coaches that we hired, where we're hiring a known quantity who is very entrenched. Like we know exactly kind of how his teams play. And yeah, to me, that just like, I think was the culmination of a front office that didn't actually know. They were so far adrift from their last success, like their last true success, that they didn't actually know what to do. Like, so they hired a guy that it was like, okay, this is our foundational, like sort of our port in the storm of like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. So like, let's just get Wilmer in and he'll at least like make us like exist in the league, right? Like we'll be maybe competitive, like tough to play against, but not necessarily like world beaters. But now they're staking, this season on Wilmer being the guy. And that is, it's just a disconnect. So I think like in terms of this front office question, to me, it just feels like this front office, at some point, you've got to ask the question, when you're so far removed from your last success, as we said, we're entering season 7. Our last, we rode the coattails of those 2 Western Conference finals, right, for quite a while. We're 5 years removed from our last Western Conference final now. Like this will be the 5th year since, that game in Phoenix.
Holy shit.
So that to me suggests that like there's probably more going on than just hey, we just haven't been able to find the right coach, because there's just something about the structure that isn't setting them up for success.
Bruh. No, I mean, I just don't even know what to say beyond that. Like you've absolutely like completely just laid it all out in terms of like how we've gone from manager to manager to manager. And I think you bring up obviously there had to be a lot of investment up front when the club was first starting out, because I mean you're starting from nothing. So Mark Lowry was supported in that way, and his Rolodex of players, the club was willing to support that financially. Then they gave a lot of funds, I would say, to Brian Clairhout and John Hutchinson to bring in players from all around the globe to try and compete. Spend a lot of money in wages and in trying to get these players able to legally play in this country with the visas and everything and the lawyers. And, the club has invested, but when they saw, I think the latest kind of project with Clairhout just completely explode, I think that's when they tighten the purse strings a little bit. And I can understand that when the owners are saying, you know what, I allowed you all sort of a carte blanche, not exactly, but at least, investment, and you didn't make the most of it. And now I'm going to pull back. I understand it, but at the same time, it's really illogical, because it's like, this is when we need investment the most, when things are going really badly. But I can see, I could see it from both sides of like, well, why am I going to fund this when you're not bringing results? And, there's just been a complete lack of creativity in rebuilding this squad under Wilmer Cabrera. I'm sorry to say, you employ your son. Andy Cabrera is one of our players. I'm sorry, but like, you brought back your son.
Wilmer Cabrera's just looking around his house like, I know I've got a striker around here somewhere.
Yeah, that, and then he's looking between the couch cushions. That's not to cast aspersions on Andy or Wilmer as people. I'm just saying it's not creative. You're bringing your son, and players, a handful of players that you've employed before. And I know I've said in the past that it is in a way a good thing because that means those players are still willing to play for you. It's not like they're not picking up the phone when you ask them to come. It's just not creative. That's all. That's all I'm saying. You know, and yeah, like again, our one like quote unquote marquee signing is a former Wilmer player, and I just, you know, and all of this in a season where we finally separated the head coach and the technical director job into two, but you're still signing Wilmer's guys. So what is the point? What is the point of that? You know, why is this club so desperate to keep Ray Sari on the payroll? To go from an assistant coach to technical director? Those are not even in the same universe of job.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, I'm not casting aspersions on people as people. I'm just talking strictly football. That makes no sense to me. So, and if I want to continue on the lack of creativity, we've brought in Echeverri, another coach, another Wilmer disciple. Like I get it, you bring the people that you like and that you have camaraderie with and that you've worked with. It's just not giving like anything novel or exciting to look forward to.
Because sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say if you look at Wilmer's history, like he hasn't been a terrible coach, but like everything with the exception of like one season at RGV has been like notoriously mid. And so and just as a throwback, that RGV season that was the year that Christian predicted them to win it all. And they
just had to get that in there.
That was a row RGV team too. So
he's played for you. Can we give him a call, please?
Well, that's the thing is like all the Wilmer disciples we're signing are like the mid ones where Jonathan Ricketts from Sacramento, like he was available and he played for RGV once upon a time, and we got Quezada, who's I guess the two signings that feel like they're Ray Sari signings are Quezada and Frank DeRoma, because he specifically said like we've been tracking these guys since they were at like LAFC, and what he really means is when they played for Las Vegas Lights when it was LAFC 2, like back in the reserve days, USL Reserve Club days. So anyways, like but we weren't even signing necessarily like we're not even signing the marquee, like the top level Wilmer guys. We're signing like the second, like the next rung down of like, well, we can't get them because they're going to a big club, but like, yeah.
Yeah. And kind of to circle back around too is like what Mika was saying about how these decisions of like things aren't going well, so like you've wasted our money for the past 2 years, and so now we're gonna give you less. Like that just again it makes sense from a purely business perspective, going back to what we talked about a little while ago, and that this is absolutely them just like protecting their pocketbooks and not really caring about improving, just being barely good enough to like put like 3,000 people there every week because that's what you need to break even plus 5%, whatever it might be. And so it just doesn't seem like there's a desire to improve. And it's not going to if that's the attitude that they're taking, because if there is a desire to improve, then you don't just give up, which is what that says to me. If you're just saying, well, we're just going to keep everything else the same and just take away the resources, there needs to be change, like systemic change, And it's just become so apparent that it's not at field level. The problem with this team is not at field level because there has been considerable change, and nothing's getting better. So that tells me that whoever is making those decisions of those changes at field level is getting it wrong. So, what's next? What you have to start moving up the ladder at some point.
And that is, I think, like what has been striking. And I think we've talked about it before. I don't think it'll surprise anybody on this podcast, but I think the amount of accountability that this front office, and I would, I'll just say in particular, like Andrew Forrest has placed in between himself, like he's placed a lot of layers in between himself and accountability for results on the field. But he is quick to take credit when things are going well, and he is very public facing when things are going well. He is not nearly as public facing when things aren't going well, and he can get quite spiky, like when questioned on results or the direction of the team, or even things like player signings, like when there's been a handful of interactions that have been I would say suboptimal in terms of even just asking about business around the club. So the bottom line is that, like, placing those layers of accountability is fine, but when you like and trying to place the footballing brains, right, like in those positions, that's completely fine. That's what you want. Like, you don't want your business guy to be the person making tons of footballing decisions. It's the Todd Bowley, like you don't want Todd Bowley to be your director of football, right? That's like how Chelsea happens. You need people who understand the game, who are like, operating at a high level to be able to make sure the organization runs well and that good decisions are being made. But you are also ultimately responsible for putting those people in the position to succeed. And like, if there is never accountability for the person who continuously appoints these people, then like it will never change. Like that's you can keep doing the same shit over and over again, and you're gonna keep getting the same results. Like it's the definition of insanity for a reason.
Oh my God. I don't know if this is going to hit for you guys, but being that we are an El Paso club, I know it's going to hit for a lot of the audience in that we are the Dallas Cowboys and Andrew Forrest is Jerry Jones, because like all the stuff that you're saying is the arguments that are consistently made, because he is the owner. I know Andrew's not the owner, but he is the business facing side and he is the general manager of that club. And kind of like you were saying, like Jerry Jones loves to take credit when things are going well and loves to put up the walls when questions get asked of him. So as you're saying that, it's all like it's hitting me and I'm like, oh my God, like this is why, like maybe this team deserves this city.
The connection is there.
We accept the love we think we deserve.
I think like the reality, like we said, like this is particularly from a footballing like and a organizational standpoint. Like I'm not making comments about the person. It is strictly about this. But the reality is that like there has to be a level of accountability. And I think to the points that people were making earlier, I think it would feel a lot easier to stay connected with the team and to feel like there is some accountability going on if people in the front office, and like I would say Andrew in particular, like made public facing statements taking responsibility for what's gone on. Like the reality is that this club has not addressed the fact that last season was horrendous. Like the worst season in club history by a distance, and we were the worst team in the Western Conference. And I think it's like it's worth saying that on paper at the beginning of the season, and I think, John from USL Tactics can probably back this up with numbers and things, with statistically speaking, one of the best squads on paper at the start of the season. When that amount of like dysfunction exists, where you have like a squad that should be performing very, very well, not performing well, a coach that the organization thinks very highly of, not performing well, like not getting those performances out of the players, the feel for the need to change direction like very early in this project, all of that stuff to me paints a picture that suggests that there are like larger issues and that there needs to be accountability like in the front office. I think it extends beyond that though too, because what we're talking about as far as stuff that happens off the field, and the public facing nature or the lack of like public facing sort of or in supporter facing events, and really just like a lack of what I would say, and this is again not to attack anyone particular at the club, but like I would say a lack of a very coherent marketing strategy, like, and how to connect with the fans, like ticket sales or average attendance, like by USL Tactics standards. And these are reported attendances. We're down 12% year over year from 2023 into 2024. And you could say, yeah, like it's a shit season, so nobody came to the games. But like 12% is really significant on an average basis across a whole season. Like that is a lot of tickets that you're not selling. And the reality is like there are ways to mitigate, like the voice memos said at the beginning of this. Like I think Nick and Mark both referred to the fact that like it's not just the fact that they were bad last year that drove the disconnection, right? And so there is like, for all of the people who are responsible for what happens on the field, there really is only one person in the front office who is ultimately responsible for the business that is done off the field, and that is Andrew. Like, and the buck has to stop with him. Like that's just it. It has to at some point.
And by extension, Alan Ledford, who has given him the keys and only peeks in every now and then from his desk in California. Period.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Christian, sorry I cut you off.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I was just gonna say, pick a struggle. Like, how is the money side gonna be so bad and the football side gonna be so bad?
And to go into this, I think like the question then becomes, and without getting overly bleak, the reason that this is concerning, and the reason that like I think far be it from any of us who we all work 9 to 5s, right? Like and our livelihood is not dependent on Seriously Loco or this club or all of that stuff. And so far be it from us like to call for somebody's job in like that direct of a way. However, like the fact that this is like this club is the livelihood of a lot of people, and this wing of Mountain Star Sports Group employs a lot of people. Like there are a lot of people who are impacted by the amount of events that go on at Southwest University Park who aren't as high up the chain as the people making these decisions. And my concern, and the reason that I think are reaching a level of more, it like it's teetering on apathy, but it is like, I think everybody can hear this, like a disappointment, and really like, I think it was anger at a certain point, to be just completely blunt. The reason for that is because it does feel like a depreciating asset, to Nick's point, like to I think Nick used that terminology in his voice memo. And that's where the concern is if there is not good decision-making and sort of there is a level of resignation in the front office that says, oh, well, it just kind of is what it is. And like, we don't have a way to change this, or we're not going to get the budget we need to compete, or all this stuff. They will eventually shut the club down. Like there is a crossover point where it becomes more expensive to operate the club than it is worth it to do, 17 home games. Like there is definitely a point where Mountain Star's balance sheet will say like, there's no point in continuing this. And it's like the academy might be worth continuing because it brings in some like whatever revenue, but like the first team doesn't bring in enough money to actually justify existing. And I think that to me is where I can't like accept the idea that like, well, this is what it is or whatever, because we know that there is far more potential in this club. And there is so much being left on the table by this front office and ownership. That yes, if they resign themselves to that fact, like, it just won't exist anymore. And like, those are players that need to go find new clubs. Those are coaches that need to go find new clubs. Those are physios and support staff and camera operators and production assistants and concessions workers and stuff, like, who are all going to not have like access to this team. And I think there is a genuine responsibility to the community for them to pull their heads out of their collective ass and like get this right, because the club existing, I think in both of those voice memos, like the club existing is good for the community. Like it is a community asset as well. And like, I think people do, yes, there's a responsibility in the sense that like it's your job and all of that stuff, but like there is a responsibility to the city of El Paso for this club to not be, one, a joke, and two, to exist, like to continue to be something that continues to make like a positive difference. And right now, like, I don't think they are necessarily taking that responsibility at all seriously enough. So yeah, that's my like maybe far too serious, but it's just, to me, that's the reality is like, and why we would even suggest that somebody should lose their job over this is because it, like, if you don't care and it is your job, like, to make this team as good as it is, like, or you appear to not care to the average fan, like, then
or if
please,
you're just not competent enough to do the job, if you just don't have the skills necessary,
then please let someone else do it. Like,
right, lest everyone lose their jobs.
Exactly.
Right. Absolutely.
That's my So
no, I sincerely hope it doesn't come to that, and I hope that nobody's taking that from this podcast that we're like, shut it all down. Like, no, the absolute opposite is what we want. We want this club to thrive. We love this club. We have, friends that work at this club, and we've made connections. The three of us are friends because this club exists. Yeah. We've met so many wonderful people in the club, outside the club, the fans. It is a community asset. It needs to remain that way. It needs to be taken seriously as such. And yeah, I mean, no, I think I can't say it any better than you already did, Phil. I mean, there is a genuine responsibility that they have to, first and foremost, like, their people, their players, their employees, the match day staff, things like that, but then to the wider community as well. Yeah, and when I'm sure all of that, it's, I don't know. I mean, it's heavy. It's really heavy to think about that kind of stuff. But they've just unfortunately not given us any reasons not to go down that doom and gloom path.
I feel like next episode we're gonna have to do some kind of like ESPN like Stephen A parody or something like that, just to like lighten the mood. Like,
Next episode's gonna be Olympia. Yeah.
we'll just go hard the other way. I think like as we kind of wrap up the talking points here, I think the one thing that I did want to emphasize is the fact that people may see like the investment or lack thereof or whatever in the club and kind of say like, well, maybe they're like biding their time or kind of like waiting. But we do like, our understanding is that like there have actually been like measures taken in terms of like roster spend has been reduced. Like that is a thing that happened, and it's not just like us speculating. Because when I wrote that piece, it was speculation, but I think since we've had it basically confirmed that that is actually the case. And it speaks to that sort of the, you know, as someone who's paid attention to American soccer for quite a while now, like lower league American soccer, there are just like things that make kind of like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up in terms of like, is stuff going okay? And anytime a team is like super duper quiet, especially about stuff like stadiums or player announcement, like that sort of stuff, it just like, it starts to get me nervous where I'm like, is the like, we've seen clubs in like fairly strong positions actually like go under too. Like Reno is the one that always sticks out for me, where it's like, you know, couldn't figure out a stadium. So like they were like one of the best teams in the league and they were just gone.
Fresno.
I mean, even Memphis, like Memphis was never felt like that strong of an organization, but like they weren't a joke. Exactly. Yeah. Like they just didn't have a stadium. And so it's like this stuff is where to like, is Mountain Star like moving the needle with El Paso in terms of like a soccer stadium? Probably not. And it does feel like the club would actually, if there were any like restrictions put on the club in terms of like, oh, well, like, you know, I think it's been speculated a handful of times, like, oh, maybe USL Championship will require teams to have a soccer stadium in order to participate in the championship. Like, I genuinely think we would drop to League One, like, rather than actually like hardcore pursue that goal. Like,
agree.
We'd be like, we get to it when we get to it. So yeah, I think there's just a lot of, and like I said, it's like a lot of little things that add up to like not a very pretty picture with Locomotive. And I think unfortunately, like the reality is that this is going to be like a pretty long season. On paper, our squad is okay. Like there are a lot of very talented players in it, and like they will have to be much more than the sum of their parts to make the playoffs. Yeah. There are just a lot of really good teams. Like there are a lot of teams that have gotten a lot better this offseason, and I don't know that we have necessarily done that. Now I will say that like I'm sure this will be listened to by many people around the organization, and like I will just say that last season, at the beginning of the season, we kind of got like called out for our criticisms of the team in 2023. Those obviously got a lot sharper last year when we were dead last in the Western Conference. And I would just say to anyone listening who maybe feels upset or whatever, like I am happy to be proven wrong. I will be elated if
begging for it.
Yeah,
I will be thrilled.
I want these takes to be ice cold.
Yeah, if this looks fucking stupid by the end of the season, like then I will gladly wear that.
Let's commit to it now. Like we'll chop up some of like our takes that aged like fucking avocados and post them at the end of the season if it happens that we did really well.
Yep. Afraid.
I'd be down for that. I really would.
Not afraid.
I mean,
I will gladly look like a fool.
and I don't think like our, like Phil said, like the criticisms have been getting stronger and stronger, but like we're not being unfair. Like, I'm
They have
sorry
had
if
ample opportunity.
yes. And like it's not like we shit on the club when they are being remotely successful. But I don't think there's anywhere that you can point to last year and say that, you know, yeah, they really got it right here for a little bit. It's like it was consistently bad to not so bad, like bad to just a little bit better than bad. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, I'm hoping that I can be, and we all can be proven wrong. And there are certain things I think that we've talked about tonight that even if the club does, like, you know, perform above our expectations, I think there are certain things that are still going to be true, even if the play on the field is better than what we're expecting.
Right.
But happy to be proven wrong by the players, and the coaching staff if they're able to get it right. Couple of big, I guess, like the first real tests of preseason are coming up. So little mini training camp in San Antonio. So we're going to play San Antonio, Houston Dynamo 2, I guess. And then New Mexico, I think, are the 3 teams that we're going to play on this little mini trip. So it's unfortunate for the fans that, I know the first few seasons, I think we got like El Paso versions of the El Paso, New Mexico and El Paso, San Antonio, like open friendlies. So disappointing for the fans that they don't get to see those. I will never forget Derek Gebhard getting fouled in the first ever Locomotive match I watched in a friendly against New Mexico United and yelling the C word as loud as possible in front of a group of school children right in front of me. And it was hilarious. Absolute legend.
Legend of the club. First goal scorer in our history, right? Yeah.
Yep.
What a guy.
I still owe getting a Locomotive jersey with his name on the back.
7 years later. I think the statute of limitations has to be coming up on that one.
I know. At this point, it's going to be a Forward Madison jersey with his name on the back. Like, that's at least I can get it customized. Anyway. So like, hopefully people have enjoyed the us like crashing out for 90 plus minutes. But you can, I guess, find this podcast like everywhere you get podcasts. And we did get one voice memo that I think, like, in the spirit of leaving on an optimistic note, we can share the voice memo from Herbie, who did leave us with this question.
With the new season coming on, I understand. So we're very lean or thin on forwards, but could there be a little bit of hope? And I know last year was very bad.
No, I'm just kidding.
Damn.
Is there hope? No.
Herbie's a legend, man. What an absolute gent. Always
Yeah.
love running into him at the swap. Thank you for the voice memo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
There's always hope.
Here's the thing. One, there's always hope. And
That's why
two,
we're here.
It's football, man. Anything can happen in sport, and especially in football. A sport that is notorious for teams getting results they don't deserve, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything can happen, and that's the beauty of like a new season upon us. Is like something might just click, you know. Wilmer, I'm sure last season was a learning experience for him, and I say that knowing full well how experienced he is, but still, it's a new situation for him. I think he's had to learn a lot about how Paso Locomotive works, how the community and the club interact together. He's made it a point to get to know the fans, and he's come on the show, and we've been so grateful for that. And I think he's tried his best to approach these issues with humility and also a steady hand. So yeah, there's always hope. I mean, we've got an experienced coach. We've got fresh blood in. I think we need more, obviously. We've already said that. We need more. It's only fair to the players that we currently have that they get more support and so that they're not running to the ground. But anything can happen. It's a new season, blank slate. Who knows, right? It's football. Football's crazy. I mean, don't want to bring up too soon, but I mean, the Merseyside derby today was wild. A draw and red cards galore. So, like, you know, it's football. Football's nuts. So yeah, there's always hope. And I mean, let's be real. It doesn't matter how bad they do. We will be there and we will be seated. So yeah.
How dare you? I'm just no, I agree in that anything's possible, and I'm excited. We'll be here, like, regardless. But it's we have an opportunity, I think, to step up a little bit, and the club can meet those who care deeply about it halfway, I think, and that is really what this is a call for. That being said, hope everyone has a good rest of your week. Happy to have spent some time with you, and for anyone who's made it this deep into the podcast, you're a legend. And we will we'll be back with some a more regular recording schedule now that we're into, getting into the thick of the season. But we'll likely be back in the coming days for a true season preview and a preview of that first match against Colorado Springs. But until then, stay loco.